I'll talk a little bit about myself throughout the presentation, so you're going to get to know a little bit more about me later on here in a minute on one of these slides. But this evening, what I want to discuss with you guys, how you out there as apartment owners and asset managers, and if you are an apartment owner and asset manager, maybe you can raise your hand for me and get a quick feel and background of maybe who on this call, this meeting right now. I'm going to scroll through these pictures. Any asset managers, apartment owners, or anyone looking to invest in apartments here at all? Raise your hand in the screen. Boom, got a couple. Awesome. Okay. All right, engaging my audience real quick here. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I feel like this is going to apply to you tonight, which is great. What I'm going to share with you is how apartment owners and asset managers can increase their apartment's profitability by a minimum of 30% in under 90 days using this blueprint that I have put together, that I've developed over the number of years of me owning and operating apartments. And those that don't own apartments, this still applies to you, even if you're brand new to apartment ownership or asset management. And been owning apartments for quite some time. So this is a framework that I've developed over a number of years after taking it on the chin, if you will, so to speak, and making a lot of mistakes and going through my own series of challenges, which I'll share with you here in a minute. But if we're all have a pulse. If we have a pulse, everyone tap your wrist. If you have a pulse, you have a pulse. Then we probably know what's going on in the real world in today's environment. We're experiencing a lot of challenges, right? It's not the same gravy train that we experienced prior to the interest rate hike and prior to all the various challenges we're experiencing today. It takes a lot to own and operate an apartment, a lot of focus. And the thing is, you may be pulled in all kinds of different directions. And maybe some of you on this call that are experiencing apartments are going through distress, or some people that know people that have apartments going through distress. And there are a lot of things going on. And so now more than ever is a time where we have to focus. And it's so important because you may feel like you're on a roller coaster. And I don't know about you, but I've had quite a few sleepless nights in this business. Even when the days were going good, I still had a lot of sleepless nights. So tonight I want to talk about how we can bring some order, how we can bring some systems and processes and ways to think about owning and operating apartments into our business so that we don't feel like this anymore, so that we can actually sleep well at night, enjoy our time with our friends and family, especially in the holidays. But what is the reality? What is going on out there in today's world? As you read the headlines, as you are connected in your various networks, the reality is probably this, that you haven't hit your projected best returns. And maybe you don't see a way of getting your property back on track. This one here is a big one. You may be working with a property management company where they're just not living up to expectations, or your property's not performing like you thought it would because the property management company, again, doesn't quite have their act together. Or maybe you're going through a rehab and your construction system that you put in place isn't working, and it's difficult to complete your project in a timely manner. Or worse, maybe because of all these challenges, you're losing investors' confidence. And you're concerned that you won't be able to raise any more capital because things aren't going like you thought they should. And so if you're on this call tonight, or if you're here right now, what I'm going to help you do is help you learn how we can supercharge your asset management game so that we can hit the autopilot button again and put your property on cruise control. And we're going to teach you, I'm going to show you real quick how we can juice and boost our NOI in a very effective way where we can increase our income while slashing our expenses. And I'm going to give you the key to unlocking or identifying the right property management company to work with. So ultimately, you can reclaim your life back and put your properties on cruise control. And those properties that are not performing so well, we're going to find some gold in those properties. We're going to pull them out and get them back on track. Ultimately, so we can catapult your portfolio and experience growth without working with difficult property management companies or starting your own, unless you have one on the call, which is great. Without investing more dollars into your property, or without having to work long hours. Now, and I'm not saying we don't have to work. In this business, you do have to work. It's not work freedom, it's financial freedom, but not work freedom. But not working well beyond quitting time, where you're giving up your weekends, giving up your evenings. And again, even if you're brand new to apartment ownership or asset management, even if you believe your apartment operations, in this case, are beyond repair and maybe on the brink of financial collapse, But a little bit about me. Yeah, I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I flew B-1 bombers. And my career in the Air Force taught me a lot that gave me, I believe, some really valuable skills that I am now applying to owning and operating apartments today. And it's two P's, people and processes, first and foremost. I learned the value of having the right team members on your team, having the right people, A players, quality people, people you can trust, people that you know that have integrity and have work ethic and have values and that are disciplined and focused. If you have all these people on your team, you're definitely well on your way to success. But then you also got to have processes. You got to have systems. And I mean, the military is very, very good at what they do. And they, you know, the Air Force has 300 and some thousand people scattered throughout the entire world. And we can execute a game plan no matter where we are, anywhere in the world, just because of these very succinct processes that we put in place. And of course, so then I applied a lot of that knowledge and that insight into owning apartments. And again, I'm going to pack a little bit about my experience in the military and how that has allowed me to be able to grow and build a portfolio and achieve success in owning apartments. But I've been married roughly 20 years. I'm a family guy. I have a beautiful wife, 3 amazing boys. But my DNA inside of me, beyond living my flying dreams, was to own apartments. And I love owning apartments. I'm excited about owning apartments, even when it's challenging, even when it's difficult. I'm all about finding ways we can optimize our properties and produce that cash flow, produce that profit, despite any type of challenges that we're experiencing. But it always wasn't like that. I had a lot of downside experiences or a lot of challenges I had to deal with. And I made all the rookie mistakes. There wasn't a lot of information out there how to own and operate properties. I hired the wrong property management company. I didn't have a right construction team or plan to put together. I didn't know how to project income growth, or it wasn't predictable. When I hired the wrong property management company, there's a lot of accounting errors on the back end. And one day I had $100,000 in payables show up I didn't even know about until I fired the property management company and found these stack of invoices on a desk. And you know, I didn't lose investors' money. Thank goodness the economy was still growing and it covered up a lot of mistakes, but I certainly lost a lot of money or didn't make the money that I thought I was going to make. But the reality is this, that the economy, we don't have any room for more mistakes. You have to be able to execute with precision and accuracy. Deals are blowing up. Property management companies are failing. Construction projects are falling apart. It's getting more difficult to raise capital. But for me, I've been able to refine my process after owning now roughly 3,000 doors and exiting 14 properties. And after working with numerous property management companies and going through numerous meetings and hundreds of KPI calls, and enduring challenges like COVID eviction moratorium and property management, firing property management companies, building fires. And I don't know if you remember the guys, for you all that live in Dallas or Texas area, we had a major ice storm in 2021 timeframe, which took out quite a few properties. But what I found, there's an easy process to follow. And I've been able to do that. This is in during COVID, very challenging time. If you remember eviction moratorium and it's very challenging to get tenants off the property and to grow our income, but I was still able to grow my income at this property 25% during COVID-19. This property in Garland, Texas, a 200 unit property, I was able to grow the income around 19%. Again, I've owned about 3,000 doors, 14 exits, realized about an average 26% return all over the US. And I've been able to eliminate uncertainty and reduce stress. So, and I've been able to live in financial freedom, not work freedom, but financial freedom. So let's talk about what that looks like. And if you're not excited about apartment operations, then go ahead and turn down your volume right now, because I'm really going to deep dive into understanding what that looks like here now. Okay, so this is what we're going to be going through. Why asset management, number one skill you must learn before you buy an apartment. Before, not after, but before. That will then enable you to buy more deals and raise more capital. Why, also number two, why picking the right property management company and learning how to work with them is the absolute key to your success that I'm seeing today. And then I'm going to share 3 biggest pitfalls and mistakes that I see asset managers making that is separating those who are absolutely doing great and those that are struggling in today's marketplace. So let's hop into the first one here. Why asset management, number one skill you must learn on your own, and how it will improve your deal flow and enable you to easily raise more capital. So just a backstory. I mean, I got into this business through a mentorship program. And the mentorship program was all about how to get the deal, how to get the deal, how to raise capital, how to get the deal and raise capital. Until you own the deal, then what do? No one ever talked about what's on the other side of owning the deal. And I already shared with you the challenge that I experienced when I got that deal, which we were crazy. We bought 3 properties at the same time, 50 units, 65 and 99, 3 LLCs, 3 loans, all wrapped up in one management company. I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. Thank goodness I had enough wherewithal and the market saved me. I was able to get through that situation. But no one's talking about asset management before you buy the deal. And that's what I want to advocate here with this first point. But before we hop into that, I think you all probably know what this is. The difference between asset management and property management. Property management are the ones that deal with day-to-day operations, to deal with tenants, leasing, collections, work orders, so on and so forth. Asset managers oversee the property management company. They are the fiduciary responsibility to ensure you maximize property value while minimizing downside risk and ensuring you meet or exceed the projected investor returns. The buck stops with you. You are in charge of the deal. You're in charge of making sure everything works like it's supposed to. But here's the thing. We are back to basics. There's so much that is being lost to execution errors. And because of that, the business plan just goes out the window the first year. Yet, I believe we can control a lot of these losses we're experiencing despite rising interest rates, despite rate cap purchasing, if we know how to execute and if we know how to utilize leadership, not just asset management, but leadership in these projects. Ultimately, it is up to you to establish rapport with the property management company. It's up to you to become someone where you are deemed as someone having mutual respect. And a lot of how I do that is spending time with property management companies, developing very deep relationships with them, and even going on the road and spending time with regional managers, spending time with property managers, asking a lot of questions, asking why they're doing what they're doing. And when I do that, when I take the time to understand them, they're going to want to take the time. They do take the time to understand me. And through that process, you develop mutual respect, in which then you can influence your property for the good. And then you have a position of leadership, and people like you, trust you, and respect you, and you can influence them. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that when you're buying real estate, you're not just buying real estate, you're buying a business. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't operate them correctly, and it's be very costly if you don't do that. And so it's very, very important that we understand the operational side. But I think a lot of people think they can get into this business as an asset manager right out of the gate by shadowing someone, which you can. You can shadow somebody and learn the skill of asset management. But I don't think that there is alignment in that. Meaning the main operator, if it's not going to be you, you're part of the Coach EP team, the main operator is in charge of operating the property, not coaching, mentoring, and teaching you. Don't you think it would be better to actually take the time to learn about asset management before you hop into a deal? And if this is for people that maybe haven't owned one yet or just looking to own one, this is food for thought, something to give you something to think about so that you don't experience the same thing that I experienced, where I'm now scrambling after owning an apartment. And you can't do that. You can learn about this business and learn how to operate a business before you get in the business. And the way you can do that is find a coach, find a mentor, find people in this group, but take the time to go through that checklist. Take the time to sit in that simulator and pretend as if you are owning a property or an apartment, going through all the various steps. Simulate actually if you own one. What will be the steps? Is the business plan? How do you work with the people, and how do you implement those processes? Take that time now at ground zero and use this crawl, walk, then run building block process so that when you're on that apartment, one, you don't feel behind. You're not lost. You actually know the questions to ask, the things to look for. You know what to predict in an apartment so that one, you can take off, and two, you can actually land. And by the way, you may be with a trusted co-pilot, you may be with a trusted co-GP, but sometimes they have heart attacks in that cockpit. You may have to take over. Or sometimes they may not actually know what they're doing. But ultimately, if you are someone brand new to this business and you are raising capital, ultimately your investors are trusting you that you know what you're doing. And if that airplane doesn't land on the runway correctly, they're not going to look to the pilot as they're licking their wounds. They're going to come to you and ask you, Why did you let me get in this deal? And why did you let this pilot crash land the airplane? Why didn't you take over the controls? And if you don't know how to do that, then I encourage you to learn how to do that today before you actually hop into that cockpit or buy your apartment. And what happens when you don't do this stuff? Again, little cash flow. You hire the wrong property management company. You work with the wrong contractors. You may even run out of money while you're going through your contract project, going through your rehab project. Don't do that. Or worse, foreclosure. And it's happening today, guys. We're seeing it. We're reading about it all over in the headlines. There's properties going through foreclosure. A lot of the brokers in here probably, chopping at the bit to get in on those listings. Property management companies are going through a lot of challenges. This is something that is not talked about, but something I know about because I'm in the trenches every day. They have staffing issues. They're dealing with the same material costs. We're pushing on to the owners. They have increase in labor costs. And all the corporate knowledge, all the skills, that left after COVID. Now it's a younger population, a younger pool of knowledge and experience. And property management companies are scrambling, hiring somebody, throw them in a property, hiring somebody, throw them in a property. And that property could be your property with very little training. And don't let them pull that wool over your eyes. You got to understand this, that they're going through a lot of turmoil and they have to evolve just as much we have to evolve in this business. And also the construction companies are going through the same challenges. So here's the key. You got to learn before you get into apartment about apartment operations, especially in today's environment. And I would advocate that apartment asset management operations should be your number one priority, not underwriting, not raising capital, but learning this side of the business first, and then taking that knowledge and information into your underwriting models, taking that into you raising capital so that you have a complete trifecta effect and you're fully prepared and you can back up your numbers with true operational knowledge and insight. That is the foundation for this business and secret to your wealth. Overall, you'll be able to then buy more deals, raise more capital, create more cash flow, and ultimately create financial freedom because word travels fast. If you're that operator, then took the time to understand and learn apartment operations and you're creating cash flow, you're beating an investor, projected investor returns, they're going to tell their friends and friends are going to tell their friends. And guess what? They're going to be knocking on your door, asking to get in on your next deal. And you don't even have to even try at that point. They're waiting to get on your next deal. That's what you want. And I believe I'm advocating then, therefore, asset management is the path to get there. All right, you still with me? Moving on to number 2. Hopefully we still have a few more minutes left there. Joseph, good to go?
Yes, take your time.
All right, wonderful. So here's the thing though. I told you property management companies are going through a lot of different challenges. And you have to recognize and understand that. And you have to know, as a now asset leader, which I defined that's important, an asset leader then knows how to build a team. And part of you building a team is finding the right property management company to operate your property for you. This is the linchpin. This is the number one reason why I see properties going under. Outside of rising interest rates, outside of rate cap escrows that you have to go put away and sucking away cash flow. This right here is so important. And I don't know if you guys have made bad hires. I've made my own bad hires. And as a result, I have now 100 unit list of questions, 100 questions, a list of 100 questions I ask property management companies that I go well above and beyond to make sure I fully understand who is this company, this company I'm bringing in to work with me directly, first and foremost, and then to operate my properties. But again, I've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. I hired the wrong company, and I brought a company into Dallas during COVID. They had staffing issues, they had procedure issues. One key learning point: don't take a property management company. You may have a relationship with other markets, other sub-markets outside of Dallas, Texas, thinking they come into Dallas and start up shop and be the heroes there as well. There's so many ancillary supporting cast members when it comes to third-party contractors, vendors, service companies that support properties that this company doesn't even have a relationship with. I don't know why it's common sense to say that now, but back in the day, you're in tight with the property management company. But they can do for you there, they can do for you in Dallas. 2 weeks prior to closing, they even have a staff. Again, going through the same issues. And guess what? The property suffered as a result. High delinquency, low occupancy, NOI dropped. You can see the numbers, they speak for themselves. As all these issues start to come to a head, boom, NOI drop, And we had to fire the company, come in, bring in a new company, start over, lick my wounds, and start to grow that property up again. And here are the things that I learned. Start the relationship early and identify the submarket and find an expert in that submarket. Spend more time with this company than usual. Don't wait until after you submit the LOI, then ask for a property management. Get them involved in the very front end. And it's amazing that those that grow up in the mastermind space, how many times do you hear from a property management company? I don't know about you, but I heard very little. Yet they are the key personnel, the key people that you're putting your futures, your success in their hands. And it's amazing that a lot of times we underwrite a deal, then we give it to a property management company, and they rewrite the whole deal again. They re-underwrite the whole deal. You ever notice that? Using different labor costs, using different income growth projections, different real world tax and insurance. You got to get them to underwrite the deal in the very beginning from a true operational perspective and have them help you see what it is actually going to be like operating this property. And when you go through that exercise and operating from operational perspective, I guarantee there's going to be some unfavorable variances, meaning your income is probably going to be less than what they're going to say. And then you have to reconcile that out and see what is going to be reality still from a conservative standpoint. And maybe you won't be able to get a lot of deals out there, but it'll keep you safe. And again, we don't have the opportunity to make the same type of risks, in my opinion, than we did in the previous cycle. Yeah, pricing's going down 30-40% for peak pricing, but still, you got to execute flawlessly in this environment. So be conservative and bring your property management company in the front of your underwriting process. And you got to spend enough time that you understand the company culture, their values, their priorities, how they get things done. You got to make sure they have an HR department that is very, very well versed and can attract the right talent. And then they take the time to train their staff, not on your property, before they get to your property. I want them hitting the ground running before they get to your property. I showed you the previous example. They're training their staff on my property because they hired them 2 weeks prior to closing. They throw them in the property and tell them, go figure it out. Kind of knew that, so I was filling in the gaps. Can't have that. If they don't have an HR department, a training program, I would highly question that. I would hate for them to have to use your property for training when we don't have any room for error. You got to make sure they understand the end-to-end project management processes. How are they going to manage and oversee the construction rehab if you're not doing it and they're going to do it? And do they have the capacity to do it? Again, are they establishing a market? How involved are they going to let you be in the overall process? A lot of property management companies give you the Heisman until you go stand over there. We'll let you know if we need something. I don't like that. It's a partnership at the end of the day. And I like smaller companies, 5 to 15, maybe max 15, where I can have a relationship with the CEO, everyone in the C-suite, and all the way down the line, end to end. I want to get to know everyone. And I want to make sure everyone is speaking the same language and reading the same sheet of music, meaning everyone can recite the values, everyone can recite the priorities, everyone can recite the mission statement for that company. Is that company's DNA ingrained in their staff? And if it's not, then you're going to have some operational breakdown. You're going to have some disunity. You're going to have some personnel issues. I know this again from airports days now doing this in the apartment world, and see how you can find a way to be involved. It's very, very important from the very beginning. Of course, I want to secret shop all of their properties. I want to secret shop their management staff again to see if there is consistency overall. And when you're able to do this and you find that right property management company, what does that look like? Low delinquency, low vacancy loss, low loss to lease, low evictions, high market renewals, and things just start working. And they started working for me. And this is for the Eleanor apartment complex, Oklahoma City, 110 units. We added additional unit for $30,000 and increased 200,000 in value because we increased NOI. This was Andrea. She lived on site. Big smile on her face right here. A lot of times she did it. She knew how to connect with the tenants. One, she lived on site, but she ruled with an iron fist. So much so that people respected her and they dared to not skip rent. I mean, consistent low delinquency, less than $100. And I owned that property for 4 years. And she ruled that property with an iron fist. And it made my life a lot easier. Where then you can talk about things other than just business at a property level, and build rapport, build community, and all those other things you want to do in this space. You can kind of move beyond the transactional into the relational things that really inspire us too, where we're impacting community and making a difference. That's what was able to happen at this property because of the strength of the property management company. Again, we were operating as is on performer rents, keeping the units as is. We didn't have to rehab them because she was so good at getting those units leased and at or above performer rent through the market rent. Bought it for 33 a door, sold it for 65. Good return on that one, 125% after 4 years hold. So let me ask you, if you take the time to build the right property management company, that they're using systems that practically run themselves, then you ultimately are able to hit your monthly goals, resulting in you then being able to create that cash flow. What would that look like for you? And do you see the importance now of taking the time to learn about this property management, to learn about how to hire the right property management company? Again, I have a due diligence checklist, 100 different questions. I can share with you after this. Last one here, guys, and we'll be done. We can open up for questions. I'm going to share with you the 3 biggest pitfalls that separate struggling asset managers from those that are not doing good versus those that are doing well. Here is the key. You got to be proactive. You got to be proactive, not reactive. It's the difference between understanding lead and lag indicators. Lead and lag indicators. You got to be able to look into the future and understand exposure and minimize that exposure. What does exposure mean in this space? Any operational event that will lead to an economic loss. Any operational event. You got to be a fortune teller in this space and see roadblocks happening before they're going to impact your property. Okay? So it happens in many different levels, right? And what are these roadblocks? Non-paying tenants, manning shortages, and personnel issues. Let's back up. Non-paying tenants, that's obvious. Delinquency builds up. You're going to have evictions. Evictions is going to create vacancy loss, which is exposure. Managing shortages and personnel issues. If you don't have enough people working in the office, they're going to get task saturated. Not going to have enough bandwidth to be able to manage everything going on with the property. The checklist items are going to not get checked, and your property is going to start to fall apart. And it's all driven by not having enough people working in the office or not having capable personnel working in the office. You as a leader have to be able to sniff that out and see that and see how you're going to have problems in the future if you don't nip that in the bud today. Material shortages kind of goes in and of itself. I mean, it explains itself. You don't have material on site. You can't finish your rehab. Can't get the interior unit done. You're going to have vacancy loss. Evictions. We just talked about. Notices to vacate. Pull up the availability report. Pull up the availability report. Pull up the availability report. You all see this right here? This is the drum beat for your property. The drum beat. It tells you all the units that are vacant, how long they've been vacant. If they've been vacant, there's reasons for all these. I know why it's not written in there. If they're vacant, then make sure it tells you why they're vacant. Make sure you understand what the market rent is, and make sure that market rent reflects the actual unit type. If this is renovated, the market rent must reflect the renovated. If it's a classic unit, classic market rent. And a lot of times that gets missed. Creates exposure, creates economic loss. See how this is all adding up when we're talking about exposure? Date available. Make sure that what your rental team is developing on your rental board, that date on the deliverable date is pushed to the availability report. Why? The leasing agent pulls availability report and they see these are the units I have available to lease. And if that date available is not accurate, they may not lease that unit. And it's sitting there rent ready, but it's not reflected as rent ready in the availability report, creating exposure, economic loss, not getting rented. Looking at your notices to vacate. These are people that said, I don't want to renew, I want to leave. Make sure you understand why. Is it because you're too aggressive on your rent rates and you went too strong on renewals, which is creating an exposure? So your decision today is going to make an impact tomorrow, which is going to create an economic loss in the future. That's me looking forward with a proactive mind and mindset and vision. And I am now compiling all of this information as I'm going through the availability report. Vacant lease, which is awesome, or vacant lease, which is good. It's vacant, it's leased and not moved in yet. Again, this means they're scheduled to move in, doesn't mean they actually will move in. There's still an opportunity for exposure because they may not move in. You got to understand that on the activity report later on. But this notice to vacate lease, this is the best. This is where we're looking ahead. We see units coming up for that are going to be vacated. They're already leased before they're empty. So quick example of how to track and monitor exposure and prevent it from happening. And if I see a lot of units coming up for available to rent, then I'm asking, do I have processes in place to make sure we can have enough rent ready product to capture all these vacant units release them and get them back on the market in a timely manner. And if I don't, we need to fix those bottlenecks today. Also, system inefficiencies, tax and insurance increases could create economic loss, rising interest rate environment. So as we're down in the ditches and we're looking at these spreadsheets on a day out, day in basis, reading financial statements and income statements, we still got to pick our head up and look around and understand what the U.S. government and the federal government is doing that's going to impact our property from a macro and micro. You got to look at the macro and the micro the entire time as you're navigating your property through its business plan. And again, it's when you're reading the KPIs, it's not about reading the information word for word, line for line. That's so annoying to me when I get on a KPI call and the manager's occupancy 95, pre-lease 98, income's this. Like, dude, I can read. I see the numbers there. I know what those numbers are. I want you to tell me what are the driving reasons behind those numbers. Ultimately, if I have unfavorable variances, what are the root causes for those unfavorable variances, and what are we doing to fix those? Tell me the story behind it. But you, as a good asset leader, should already have looked at that information and know the questions they're going to ask before you even hop into that KPI call, so you don't misinterpret the information. And you still got to be able to get ahead. Again, if I'm seeing that delinquencies increasing, I'm probably going to have a lot of evictions and occupancy vacancy that's going to happen. And I got to be able to put in a rehab plan to make up for that occupancy loss in the future. Next big mistake, focusing on rent bumps versus occupancy. Rent bumps versus occupancy. I think this is another mindset shift where value add space, we're all thinking about lease trade out, rehab the unit, bump the rent, put it back on the market, versus keeping the property full and then above a certain threshold, 90, 93%, rehab those units and squeeze out the lost lease. But a lot of what people do is they get into a property, they immediately start rehabbing, take a lot of units offline and don't rehab them in an efficient manner, and experience so much vacancy loss. And if you're ever looking on an income statement, one unit and say compiled over, say across one unit can lose $1,200, and say you have 5 to 10 units, that's like, $6,000 to $12,000 of vacancy loss just in 1 month over 10 units. It can wipe you out just like that. So we got to be able to manage this correctly, manage this exposure correctly. Vacancy loss creates the biggest loss to any business plan. What are these events? Going too aggressive rent renewals, like I told you, and them not renewing and bouncing out because they said you're too expensive for me to live there. High delinquency leading to evictions. Slow work orders. People not happy. They don't want to live there anymore because they didn't get their units upgraded, fixed in time, or lack of rent-ready units creates this bottleneck, and now you have vacancy loss. You have no units to be rented. So I think the mistake is people focus on rent bump, rent bump, rent bump. I'm on a lot of KPI calls. When you're down in the 80s or you're below 90%, how about you lower rents and juice the physical, get it stabilized, burn off that vacancy loss, which is going to be a pretty quick chunk of change, say $10,000 easily you can do, and then focus on lease trade outs. So a quick example, so you have one unit that costs $10,000 to rehab. Classic rent rate is $1,000. Upgraded rent rate is $1,200. Say, on average, it takes 2 months to get the tenant out, rehab it, put it on the market to be leased in the slower season, and then get it released. If it sits on the market for 2 months, you're going to lose $2,400. No one's living in it. You're not collecting rent. You're going to lose $2,400. But you're only going to experience a $200 rent bump. Okay. So if you experience a $200 rent bump, it's going to take you 12 months just to break even. That money you just lost, the $1,200, is going to take you 12 months to get it back. And if you then rent that unit, since it sits on the market for 2 months, only for 10 months, and collecting $1,200 a month, you're going to collect about $12,000. Now, wouldn't it be just as easy to release that unit, renew that unit at $1,000 monthly rent, and just collect that $12,000 and not have to spend that $10,000? This is a very, very basic example, but I'm trying to illustrate the point, the impact that vacancy loss has on the overall business plan and how we need to minimize that vacancy loss. Now, if we're in huge ramp up leasing season or ramp up season where you're trying to get through like 10 units per month, if you have a good operations system, minimally you should be able to do 10 units per month. 15 if you're really, really good. And some people can get up to 30 if they're really, really, really good. It's all about manpower and systems on that side of things. But just times everything by 10, you then can lose $24,000 like that. I've seen it happen on my own income statements. I've seen it happen on other people's income statements. Take 10 units offline. Your construction team is not that good, or they're not well oiled just yet, and you just lost $24,000. Think about the impact of that. Think about the impact. And we take these properties over and we want to just quickly come in and turn everything around. And a lot of people leave, and then you're down in the 80s. You're already down in the 80s on your occupancy. How much impact is that going to have to your NOI, the bottom line? When it hits the NOI, it has a huge impact to your NOI because you came in too strong, came in too aggressive, and you dropped that NOI like that. You got to ease into these properties. You got to ease in and keep your occupancy high, especially right now when most people are underwriting in 24, zero rent growth. And year-over-year rent growth is decreasing. And if we're going to go into aggressive, it's going to have a huge impact on your property. And so I advocate renewals. I'd advocate renewals. Retention and renewals. Conserve your capital dollars, the $10,000, $100,000. Conserve that. Keep that for a rainy day. Keep that in your capital slush fund and focus on renewals and keep your occupancy high. Minimize your vacancy loss, minimize your rehab costs. And now, instead of losing $2,400, you're gaining $2,000. Instead of losing $24,000 over 10 units, you're gaining $20,000. And if you look at this on a valuation standpoint, just from a 6% cap rate, you're going to have the same value overall. And wouldn't it be better just to renew and save those capital dollars and still improve the value of your property and not go through all that headache? And here's the reality. A lot of times, and I track every single lease, by the way, we renew it, we rehab it, they go in, I track that lease and I see how long they live in that unit. If you have a delinquency issue or you have a demographic issue, they trash that unit and then they bounce out or they leave early. You spent $10,000. It actually is more. It actually is 10, 15,000, 18,000 in some cases if you're doing a full rehab. You spent all this money and they left. They left. And now you wasted all that money and you actually have delinquency. And you have they're caught up in the eviction court and all these things. Giving you some food to thought. Think about how you're going to execute a business plan in a more streamlined fashion that doesn't expose you as much. And now back this information into your underwriting model so it accurately reflects that, so that when you actually purchase a property, you hit the ground running, knowing exactly how you're going to execute the game plan and what actually happens in reality. The reality is a lot of times they leave that unit, they get evicted, and they don't pay that full rent, and you just burned all that money. And now they trash the unit, and you have to rehab it again. If you focus on vacancy loss first and burn that off, then think about how that will impact your underwriting model. Say you're really, really good, though. Say you can get it rehabbed in 1 month versus 2 months, which is good. Companies can do this. I see them do this. They get a unit offline, evict them, rehab it. It's rehabbed and released in 30 days. Awesome. You only have 1 month of vacancy loss. But over that 1 month, you actually earned an additional $1,200 profit. So 11 months at $1,200, $13,200. If you'd left it as is, you would collect $12,000, about a $1,200 profit. And you got to maybe say 12% NOI on that example there. Is that still worth it though? And you're still exposing yourself to execution risk. Execution risk is something you need to understand in this business. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. Takeaways. Maybe lease trade-outs don't always make the most sense. Execution is everything, and minimizing vacancy loss. Retention is key, especially in today's environment where you have zero rent growth. Vacancy loss is the biggest killer. The last thing is manage the rehab project. You got to have a game plan. Start with the end goal in mind and work backwards. Me as a bomber pilot, I always start at the target, and I built a game plan backwards. The airplane takes off here, and now I know a direct path to get to that target. It's no different here in this space, in the apartment space, at least how I think about it. End goal is cash flow, projected return. Do not do anything in this business unless it's going to create that net result. There's no point. Doesn't matter if you slap lipstick on your property or make it look really, really cool. If it doesn't drive a profit, why are you doing it? And a lot of people don't understand. This is a business again. It's not just real estate. It's ultimately a business. And you can have a lot of dirty properties or not so cool looking properties that do absolutely amazing. Some of the most hairiest dogs that I've cleaned up and just made them look simple gave me the most return on my investment. So you start with the end goal, you identify the roadblocks, you plan it out, execute, and you track. End goals, investor returns. Really, roadblocks is first. I always want to understand roadblocks, and then I'm going to create a plan before I actually encounter those roadblocks. And then we actually have a very systemized, orderly way to schedule out each of those units. All those units come up on the availability report when they're going to vacate. I already know the date there. I have the management team go in and look at that unit before they're even vacated. I write an entire scope and estimate. I know exactly how much it's going to cost. I know my material order. I order those materials. I know my lead times on countertops, windows, backsplash. So I have zero bottlenecking so that when that tenant moves out, my materials at the doorstep with my construction team to go in and knock out that unit. And every single line item on that estimate is scheduled out on a Gantt chart. Very systematic, very organized, very streamlined. I can turn minimum 15 units, full renovations in 30 days or less on my team and my system, my process, after learning it the hard way. Then you got to execute, because at the end of the day, vacancy loss in the back of my mind. And I want to make sure not only I'm executing, I have quality control so that I can get the maximum rent that we projected based upon the quality of that unit. And we track everything on the KPIs. And if you do this, then you have enough rent-ready units given your future exposure so that you do not have any bottlenecking. But again, you have to understand execution risk. What is the full renovation required compared to what is the capacity and capability of your team? That is your job as an asset leader to understand it. If you mess that up, you're exposed. You're going to have bottlenecking. You're not going to get done on time. You're going to be over budgeted or behind the timeline on your project. And now you have economic loss as a result. And we can't afford to do that. And again, I've experienced that with my properties of bottlenecking, didn't have the lead times correctly figured out. It was actually very, very difficult to do during COVID. It took me 4 months just to get windows and countertops and cabinets. So that was fun. But then you build in those timelines, and later on, we had this down, 15 units like clockwork, under budget and ahead of schedule. And now we're stabilized and we have that massive, amazing NOI rent growth. So you got to use this roadmap. Start with the end goal in mind. Foresee those roadblocks, those future roadblocks. Set up your team and your system to navigate around and mitigate that risk. Make sure you have effective operational decisions with the right team, the right processes. And then don't forget about how the capital markets is influencing your overall game plan. And today, because of the rising interest rate environment, we withheld going and finishing off the entire interior renovation plan. There was no net effect. There's no reason to, because of the example I shared with you. The $200 rent bump wasn't enough. With the slowdown in rent growth, held on to my capital dollars, preserved it, set it aside for a rainy day, and still achieving actually pretty good, strong organic rent growth as is. And it wasn't 10, 15%, maybe 8 to 10 now, but now I'm still preserving the capital of my property and maintaining the value of my property overall. Recap, talked about why asset management, number one skill you must learn before you get into apartments, why you got to know how to pick the right property management company, and why you need to understand the biggest pitfalls that separate from amazing asset managers versus those that are struggling.